Good afternoon, everybody. I'm PennLive Opinion Editor John Mysick. We're continuing our editorial board endorsement interviews with the United States Senate candidates. We're wrapping up today with U.S. Rep. Lou Barletta, Republican of the soon-to-vanish 11th District out in Hazleton. If you were following along on the Facebook Live, feel free to type questions into the comments, and we will try to get to as many of them as we possibly can in our allotted 60 minutes. So with that, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
You've been here before, you know the drill. You can give a brief opening statement if you'd like, or we can dive simply right into questions.
Let's dive right into the questions. I don't want to filibuster any time.
Anything for you if you want to go
Okay,
go first.
thank you. Give us a sense of how you are feeling going into this midterm election, given the landscape, given the dismal approval rate that President Trump has, given the fact that he won Pennsylvania by a very small margin, the fact that Senator Toomey also won, not a very rigorous margin, not like Casey's back in 2012. How do you feel going?
So I feel really good. I mean, this is the first time I've ever run statewide. I remember, my time from mayor when I finally had to run in a congressional district, how large it is and how difficult it is to get around everyone. Well, try getting around the Commonwealth. It's not easy. So I've got to meet a lot of people and get their sense of how they feel. Not so much what the polls say, but I rely on my instincts in actually meeting people. And my sense is, as I travel, that what the polls are saying and what I'm hearing and feeling are two different things, much like what happened in the 2016 election when President Trump won. I don't believe people who have supported the president, and there were a lot of Democrats that did, obviously, especially working class, blue-collar Democrats who voted for Donald Trump. I don't believe they're disappointed because he has been consistent on what he has campaigned on. If we look today, he's given people in Pennsylvania and across the country tax cuts, more of their money back. Over 4 million people have seen bonuses or wages increased. ISIS, I serve on the Homeland Security Committee, Counterterrorism and Intelligence Subcommittee, and it was just over a year ago that we were talking about a caliphate, about ISIS actually taking over and coming here into the United States. We were watching Americans going to Syria, being radicalized and coming back, then literally radicalizing Americans over the internet. ISIS is practically non-existent right now under President Trump. We see North Korea, a crazy dictator, threatening nuclear war, coming to the table. Business confidence is at an all-time high. Consumer confidence is at an all-time high. Women's unemployment is at a 18-year low. Hispanic unemployment's at an all-time low. African American unemployment's at an all-time low. He's renegotiating trade deals, putting America first. He's already building the wall, securing the borders. What is there to be unhappy with? So I disagree with the polls, just like the polls said Donald Trump would not win Pennsylvania. I don't sense that as I travel around. So, what I hear is the Democrats who have voted for Donald Trump will have a hard time voting for Bob Casey, who is taking a resistance position to the president's agenda. So I think that's what's going to make this race so interesting as we move on.
What are 3 major issues then that you hear from east to west?
Build the wall.
Build the wall.
Build the wall. I hear that everywhere. I don't know if it's just because it's me or, but people are concerned about the wall and security. Jobs are still the main thing, and the opioid epidemic, how it's affected just about everybody, not only here, but it seems like, and we know this, the Appalachian region for some reason has been hit even harder than other areas. So I mean, there 3 things that we hear, but it's mainly jobs. People mostly care about their own families first, and and how they're affected. So I'm hearing people appreciate that this president is standing up for working men and women, whether it's renegotiating trade deals or getting tough, getting tough around the world. But most importantly, people want the swamp drained. I know it's a nice cliche and it's amusing, but I think we're at an interesting time in American history where a lot of people just gave up and are now back wanting changes in Washington. And I hear a lot of that, drain the swamp as well.
To that point, the president's VA pick went into seemingly permanent confirmation limbo today after revelations about his own personal bad behavior.
Sure.
Ronnie Jackson and drinking and other behaviors while he was in the Navy. Mr. Pruitt is under a cloud and may well be dismissed. Mr. Price had to leave HHS because of his flying habits. Secretary Zinke got criticized for his flying habits. The former secretary of the VA had to leave because of his own malfeasance. That doesn't sound like draining the swamp, Congressman. How do you reconcile that?
Well, number one, I don't believe this president is going to tolerate I know Dr. But I know Dr. Price, and it was actually the president who said he had to go. So, this is a man who's employed a lot of people, who's had to hire and fire, which we all know he does very well. He's probably fired more people than any president in a year, and that the way is. That's his executive experience, I think, that is showing, where he's not afraid to openly discuss behavior or job performance. He's not afraid to discuss it openly. So, as far as Pruitt and some of those, I know Trey Gowdy is investigating, and a lot of these things, John, are administrative issues that once they cross the line into ethics behavior, then that's where Congress steps in. But listen, I fired a lot of people in my own business and when I was mayor. So it takes a while. Remember, Donald Trump was not a politician. So it does take a while until you can surround yourself with the right people. I remember when I first got to Congress, John Boehner asking me if I had a problem because I was going through some staff rather quickly as a freshman when I first got there, and I told him no, I didn't have a problem. The fact is that each member of Congress gets 18 staff members, and that's for your district and in Washington. And I just felt that if we're going to serve the people, you have to find the 18 best people that you can find. Sometimes it takes a while.
So you don't believe the administration's in disarray with more staff departures than previous administrations?
I don't, John. I think there's a lot of focus on it. I don't know if we focused on President Bush's and President Clinton's staff coming and going. I don't know if it was as much news or not. I don't know if it's, we're in a 24-hour news cycle now where, we have to talk about something all day. You can't talk about the same thing. It's not like Walter Cronkite again, 6 o'clock you saw the news and then you watch Bonanza. It's a lot different now, so I don't think so. I don't believe that, and I'm not concerned. I believe the president's going to surround himself with people that can do the job. And I also see a pattern that when a job evolves to something else that he needs done, I don't think he's afraid to, even if it's not for behavior, but to replace somebody because he thinks somebody can now do a better job at what he wants to do at that time. I just think he's not thinking in a political sense, but more of a business sense of this is our new plan, and I found somebody who I think can help us more. So I don't focus on that. It's not really. I don't know how much that the average person in Pennsylvania is worried about that. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their security, their children, education, health care. I mean, these are the issues that really drive most of the conversations I have. As I've been traveling, I don't think one person brought up Pruitt to me on the streets of Pennsylvania. I don't think they're as concerned with that as they want. They want to take care of their families.
You are a member of a co-equal branch of government. presumably, if you get elected to the Senate, you'll be expected to be an independent voice and a check against executive power. Can you cite one example where you furthered the White House?
Yeah, sure. After-school programs. You know, the president had zeroed out the after-school programs. You know, I'm sure you know, it's been well reported. I got together with the Democrat Senator, John Udicek, to start SHINE in Luzerne County. SHINE is a school in homes and education that was started in Carbon and Schuylkill County. And it's just an unbelievable after-school program. It has a 12-year history of changing the lives of children. Over a 12-year period, I'm gonna brag about SHINE a little bit because I want this to be a model for the country, and this is where the President and I have differed. So the kids that go to SHINE are kids that are not either performing well in school or need some help or are not doing well. When I was mayor, I saw children 9 and 10 years old get recruited into gangs, and I felt helpless that there was nothing that we could do. Literally, gangs were recruiting young children. You know, the police showed me a class picture of a 3rd grade class. There was like 3 or 4 kids giving gang signs in that class. When I went to this after-school program, their class participation of these kids who were not performing well in school had gone up over 90%. Their class attendance had gone up over 85%, and their graduation to the next grade went up over 90%. They were building robots when I went in. It was just amazing. In Luzerne County, over 300 kids drop out of school every year. What's going to happen to those 300 kids? Nothing good. I mean, the chance of them doing well or succeeding, or the fact that they can get into trouble with, whether it be with gangs or something else, are probably better than them having a good life. I believe keeping kids in school, changing the direction of their lives. SHINE, there's no books. You work in teams of 4, and it's STEM education plus the arts, so we call it STEAM. You're in school from 3 to 6, and you get a meal. And I got together with Senator Udicek, who's a Democrat. We got Wilkes University to be the administrator. We were able to get money, state money, private money, and over 50% of it comes from the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which is a federal program for after-school programs. That's where the lion's share of the money comes in. We were able to start that in Luzerne County, and the fact that John's a Democrat, state senator, and I was a Republican, was what made it so attractive, because I believe there's areas where we can put politics aside, and this was a perfect project for us to be an example for other politicians to work together for the common good. We started it in Luzerne County, and they're getting the exact same results in Luzerne County that they were getting in Carbon and Schuylkill. I sit on the Education and Workforce Committee, and this is where the separation of the President and I come in. I sit on the Education and Workforce Committee, and lo and behold, the President's budget had zeroed out all the money for after-school programs. And I don't know if there was ever a time when I used more force and voice to try to change that on the committee, and single-handedly was able to get this money put back into the budget. For that, saving after-school programs, not only SHINE, but saving all after-school programs around the country. For that, I was voted Legislator of the Year by the National PTA Association, the only legislator in the Senate or House for that work. That's one example. Another example is I think the President should have a dog, and we disagree on that as well.
Stephanie? Okay. Yes. You touched on Syria a couple of minutes ago, Ben, and the successes there in beating back ISIS. The President, though, has suggested a fairly advanced timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. forces. There's been suggestion that doing so would allow for Russian and Iranian hegemony there and allow ISIS to take root again. Are you concerned about the hastiness of a withdrawal? Do you break with the administration there? What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I've always taken a position, even with President Obama. you know, that a president should listen to his generals on the ground. However, this president has been, you know, prior to becoming president, has been very clear about he doesn't want to get into nation building. You know, he was concerned with the war in Iraq, so he's been pretty clear what his, you know, his foreign policy is. I think the strikes in Syria were well done, and I supported it because they were targeted, specific strikes. The president had a right to do that because we do have American soldiers on the ground there. But what I think is different, and what I like about the policy right now, John, is that he has moved forward with allies, and is building a coalition, I believe, that will stand up to other countries, whether it's in Syria, and Russia is another example. You know, having France and Great Britain join with us. You know, again, this president's pretty clear. He does not want to get into nation building. He does not want to put a lot of troops on the ground. However, when somebody crosses a line, as Syria did, we cannot stand quietly while this man uses chemicals on men and women, or women and children. He struck and pulled out. So
it was a punitive strike and a largely symbolic one. It didn't take away Assad's capacity to build more chemical weapons. Is cruise missile diplomacy the best way to go about this there, or does the administration need a more coherent?
Well, I think he's doing, you know, I think he's doing a real good job in getting inside the heads of these crazed dictators. We saw it in North Korea, where everyone doubted his rhetoric and criticized the president's rhetoric as it was going to, you know, cause a nuclear war. We have now North Korea wanting to sit down. Same thing with China. You know, China has been a very big problem for the United States in our trade, unfair trade. He has China listening again. I believe that countries will think twice because they don't know. He's not predictable, whether it's through Twitter or a strike like we saw in Syria. This president is not predictable. He said that in the campaign, if you remember, is, you know, if people think I'm crazy, that's good because you don't know what I'm going to do. And I believe I think a lot of his success has been because the United States has been too predictable in what it will and won't do. So I don't think any of us, myself included, can say what he will or won't do in the future.
Let me return to the original premise of my question. He lambasted the former President Obama for premature withdrawal from Iraq, criticizing him for the chaos that it sowed there.
But he didn't want to be in Iraq in the first place because he also criticized, he thought...
Well, that's another debate.
Right.
But he is now taking a similar course of action in Syria, talking about a hasty withdrawal of American forces that could similarly lead to Iran and Russia solidifying their interest in the region and perhaps allowing ISIS to gain a toehold again. How are those two situations different in your judgment, and why is this the better approach than the one you criticized the previous administration for?
Because this president actually will strike, as he has. I mean, he's used the mother of all bombs. He's told Syria that, you know, we were not going to stand by and allow chemical weapons being used on people. ISIS is just about gone. I don't believe our intelligence will allow ISIS. If our intelligence tells us that ISIS is again growing again, I don't believe this president will allow it. I just don't see him using his foreign policy the same as President Obama or even President Bush as well. I just think this president is going to deal with the issue at hand. I don't believe Syria is going to use another chemical weapon. If they do, they know what the result will be. So even though, you know, you may say that it didn't take out their chemical capability, I think it sent a pretty strong message to them. If they use it again, we all know eventually, you know, they'll get hit again. So, I mean, we've doubted, so far everyone's doubted his foreign policy. And to date, it's been pretty good. I mean, in a year, we have North Korea talking, ending their nuclear program per se. We'll find out. Suspending. We'll find out. And I don't know if anybody trusts what they say.
Well, in a way, that's been a victory for the North Korean regime, though. By virtue of him agreeing to sit down, that's legitimized, or at least given Kim the legitimacy that he thinks he deserves on the world stage. I'd be curious to know what you think would be a successful result of a sit down with North Korea. What does that look like to you?
Well, not suspending their nuclear program, but ending it. I mean, he's a madman, and we'll see what. I guess we'll see how far we can go and what. I don't know if we could ever determine something as a success or not with people like that. Next year could be different. So I don't know if we can actually declare victory ever. I think you just got to continue to deal with these people, because they're unstable. Obviously, you're not talking about a stable leader. You're talking about somebody who's unstable.
Well, I mean, I think we can agree that when we say denuclearization, it means a very different thing to the way they interpret denuclearization.
Yeah.
I mean, can there be
I mean, let's face it, John. We would. I mean, even right now, I think we'd all be happy, even with a suspension, compared to what he was doing. So, I just think we got to just keep moving the ball forward, and eventually getting to where we hope to be. I just don't know if you get it. I don't know if you can get that all at once or not.
So circling back to one of your favorite topics, immigration. Congress failed to present a solution. I think there were no less than 4 different bills that were voted on. So we're back to square one. The Dreamers and DACA, there's no solution to that. And President Trump is going forward with the border wall. And in the meantime, the majority of Americans agree that the Dreamers should have a path to citizenship, and the majority of Americans also are against a border wall. So where Washington stands now, is it heading in the path of a political victory or a political failure?
Well, this is part of the Never Trumpers, this resistance at every step of the way. I think that this president has been more willing than most people would even expect in dealing with the DACA recipients. Actually tripling, I believe he tripled the amount that President Obama was talking about, and even with that, even by tripling the amount of DACA recipients that he was willing to take out of the shadows and legalize, the Democrats still would not agree to do that when they were willing to shut down the government for the DACA recipients. But then when they actually had a chance to get it done, they wouldn't. And so what was the holdback that no Democrats would be willing to do that when they claim that this has been their issue for so long that we need to take care of the DACA recipients, and I believe we all agree that they should be treated with compassion, and that these are people who have come, some children, some a little older, at no fault of their own, and that they needed to be treated with compassion and dealt with in a way that is acceptable to the American people and is also compassionate to them. I thought President Trump reached that place. I was stunned that the Democrats would not agree, especially since they've accused the Republicans of not caring about the DACA recipients, and the Republicans were ready and ready to move forward, and then the Democrats again had to stand up, and they would not give President Trump a victory, even if it came to the DACA recipients. So what was so offensive in the president's proposal? Build a wall? secure the borders.
Ending family-based immigration.
Yeah.
I think that was the primary one of the
What's
among
wrong?
the modes of contention.
But what's wrong with that, John? Here's the problem with that. Again, coming from my homeland security background, you're letting in cousins of cousins of cousins of cousins. You have no idea about that person's background. That's not an immigration policy that works for America. That's an immigration policy that works for, almost like an open borders policy, where we need to reform our legal immigration policies to bring people into the country that can benefit America. For example, we need more ag workers. Our guest worker program does not work for Americans' agriculture, especially like the mushroom farmers. They're not. It's not like they're picking oranges, where it's a seasonal type of agriculture. They need people to work in the mushroom farms 12 months out of the year. We don't have a guest worker program that does that.
Well, Mr. Miller, the president
but here's the
wanted to change to bring in more highly skilled.
So what is offensive?
The White House's very policy that was to foreclose those
Well,
people.
let's go back to the original question. What is so offensive about saying we want to make sure we take care of the DACA recipients, right? We want to treat them right. For that, we want to make sure that we don't have the same problem 5 years from now, because if you don't secure the border, you're going to have the same problem 5 years from now, so you're going to have the same discussion with the American people. What are we going to do with the 800,000 people that are here again? I mean, this is just, we're talking basic here. That I don't know if anybody here can disagree with that. Can I?
How do you? Again,
No, let me just go on to the chain migration.
Your campaign millers, though, said at one point that America is quote at war with illegal immigrants. How's that?
No. Not with illegal immigrants. I'm at war. We're at war with the drug dealers that come in illegally. We're at war with the human traffickers that come in illegally. I mean, you can spin this any way you want to spin it, but are we not at war with the drug dealers? Are we not at war with human traffickers? I mean, do you know what happens to
I don't
these?
believe your mailer draws the kind of distinction.
Well, I don't think it draws the distinction that you said either. So you can read into it whatever way you want to read into that, but we are at war with drug dealers. I mean, people shouldn't get offended by that. I don't want drug dealers into the United States. I don't want human traffickers coming into the United States. I've been at the border a number of times. I don't want people to come into the country and take away jobs of people that can't afford to lose their jobs. I don't want people to come into the country and depress the wages of American workers. What's wrong with that? I'm not saying you can't come to the United States. I'm saying we have a process to do that. When are we going to stand up for the American people instead of standing up for the illegal immigrant all the time? What about the American workers that are affected? What about the American families that are affected? What about the high school dropout that loses his job? What happens to that kid? Does anybody care about him or her? Or do we just care about the person that came in here illegally? That's all I'm saying is that, it's about time we start standing up for the needy people here in the United States first. And I believe that's why we have Donald Trump, because finally somebody is saying that, and I'm not afraid to say that. I want immigrants to come into the country, but I want them to come in legally.
We hear this a lot from conservatives, but yet you don't address the fact that study after study, including a study from the National Academy of Sciences, finds that immigrants and undocumented immigrants account for very little criminal activity in this country, and yet we continue to hear what a lot of
No, actually, a study that just came out that actually showed the opposite for the first time, and I can't quote that, but I'll get it for you. Because what they're doing is they were taking in immigrants. If you just take people who came into the country illegally, not immigrants, not legal immigrants, into that same bucket, then the facts are actually different. In fact, I think you'll be shocked at the numbers that came, and that just recently came out, because that's been something that's been quoted in the past, but has been recently corrected in the fact that that's not true.
We'll take a break for a second from the.
Add some water.
What's that?
We're taking a break?
Taking a break. No, from the interrogation for a reader question. This reader would like to know how you reconcile yourself being called a conservative when you, quote, adamantly oppose core principles like free market and support big government. It might be an allusion to your opposing free trade agreements and the like.
So read the question again. I want to make sure I get his answer.
The question from the reader is how you reconcile calling yourself a conservative when you adamantly oppose core principles like free markets and support big government.
Well, I think our free market and hasn't worked out. Our trade deals haven't worked out really well for the American workers, and so I don't label myself anything. If I can just correct that, I try to be practical and a pragmatist. I just try to be practical, and so I care about the American workers. We're losing a lot of jobs and watching wages get lower because of our trade deals. So I think it's time that we try to level that playing field, and again, let's get wages up. So I just think we need better trade deals that work for America, not for every other country. Realizing that these other countries want to sell it into the United States markets, but we haven't used that leverage to get better deals for American workers, and that's what I'm concerned about first.
Talked about infrastructure, so I don't know if any candidates would be against it. Improvements on roads, bridges, airports. What separates your views on how these things should be fixed versus your opponents?
Yeah, well, so, this is a topic, a subject that's very close to me. I grew up in a family that built roads and bridges, so I grew up in the quarries around asphalt plants, ready-mix concrete, and I watched that industry and how it worked. The only committee I really wanted to serve on when I first got to Congress was Transportation and Infrastructure. I have been vocal since day one in the fact that we are not treating infrastructure as a priority in Congress. We don't have a sustainable revenue stream to fund infrastructure. What I mean is we don't have a recurring revenue to be able to plan and build our roads and bridges. We consistently fund our highway bill by taking money from different sectors, whether we took it from the insurance industry, we took it from the banking industry. You can't plan and build roads and bridges like that. You need to know there's that reoccurring revenue. It takes almost 12 years from the time you plan a project to completion. And if you don't know the money's there, sometimes you waste a lot of money because you never get through the entire process. So that's, I've been very vocal about that, and Congress just won't step up and have this discussion with the American people like they did here in Pennsylvania in talking about whether it's a user fee or not, some kind of recurring revenue so that we can fix our roads and bridges. I thought we should have started with infrastructure very first instead of healthcare, because this would have been a good issue for Democrats and Republicans to come together, because there should be no separation with party when it comes to infrastructure. Not only that, I don't know if there's anything better to grow the economy than infrastructure. When there's a lot of work, infrastructure work, people will make good money. And when they make good money, they buy things, they fix their homes, they take their families out to dinner. That money goes into the local economy, and it helps everyone, from the local waiters and waitresses in the diners to restaurants to hardware stores. It just gets recycled over and over again. So this will be a good test as to for both parties, and I'm going to put both parties on the hook here because I want to fix America's infrastructure. This will be a good test to see if Republicans will come to the table and be willing to say we need to invest in infrastructure. And it'll be a good test to see if the Democrats really want to work with Donald Trump at all, or is it going to be no to everything? and find a reason, just like they did with DACA, to find a reason to say no when infrastructure is something that should bring both parties together.
All right, I want to run 3 possible funding streams past you, and get a yes or no on this, because we've heard
Well,
about
I can't promise a yes or no, because if it needs an explanation, I got to give it.
a yes or a no with an explanation.
Okay.
In that case. We hear a lot of happy talk about recurring revenue, but what that means is somebody has to pay for something.
Right.
Would you support a higher federal gas tax?
So here's what I like. I'm going to give you an honest answer,
Okay.
and if you don't like the answer at the end, you can tell me, and I think you will.
I probably
Okay.
will.
Here's
You
what
needn't worry.
here's what I like. I would like to take away the federal gas tax at the pump, actually eliminate it, and I would like to move it upstream and tax the oil company instead of the motorist, because the oil companies are making the greatest profit out of what they're selling that the motorists are using. So I would like to see a user fee moved upstream, reduce it at the pump, and move it upstream and actually put it on the oil companies.
That was like a franchise tax?
It'd be like instead of a per gallon tax, it would be a per ton, because that's how they work, and I'd put a per ton fee upstream on the oil company. Now, will some of that flow back down? Could, it could, but I still believe, and there's not a silver bullet, let me just say this too, there's not a silver bullet as to a reoccurring revenue for infrastructure. I wish there was, because everything we're doing, even though I support that idea that we just talked about, everything we're doing is to try to use less gas. We have now electric vehicles, trying to carpool. We're trying to use less gas, so that's not the answer in the end. Vehicle miles traveled is probably, and we're a long way from that, but that's probably the fairest, the fairest way to have a user fee that doesn't punish senior citizens who may not drive very much at all, or someone like myself that's in the car all the time.
It should be totally interstates.
So I don't think the federal government should tell the states whether they can or they can't. So this is what I would like to see. I'd like the federal government to give that option to the states, and let that get closer to the people, rather than Washington decide whether we could toll Interstate 80 or 81 or 80 out in California. That shouldn't be a decision in Washington. That should be a more localized issue, and let the people of each state determine whether or not they want to do that. But this is, where the federal government's wrong, because we don't give the states that ability. They can't do it without the federal government saying it's okay. But yet we tie states' hands as to what they can do. So either the federal government needs to step up to the plate or get off the pot, like we like to say, and either allow the states the ability to make their own decisions, or the federal government needs to do something to make sure the states have the revenue.
Would you give all 3?
That would have been all 3.
Okay.
Yes.
We do have a question from a reader on the idea of putting the levy on the oil companies, or the user fee rather than consumers. What would stop the oil companies from pushing those costs down to consumers rather than?
Well,
directly?
again, you can cap it or put some kind of a control, but it's possible that it will. Some of it will come down on the. Again, the federal government could put a cap on an increase and step in, but I don't believe just. I don't know if it will all come downstream back to the motorist, but it's possible that some of it will. But we might be able to cap it so that they cannot just.
Step into guns.
And let me just, if I could go back, because I'm thinking about it as you're saying. So for example, if we were going to put a quarter gas tax at the pump, what I'm saying is, I'm just using the quarter because I think the president used that number in negotiations. instead of putting a quarter at the pump, I would move that upstream and put that quarter per, you'd have to roll it over into what the per ton price would be. So it would still be a quarter. It wouldn't be any more than what you would have put on right at the pump. So will all of it come down? If it all does, you're no worse off than what you were if we put it on at the pump. Will it all come down? There's a possibility not all of it would come down. But they wouldn't be able to go beyond that amount. So, if you know what I'm saying. Thank you.
So the latest Franklin and Marshall study finds that 90% of Pennsylvanians support more rigorous background checks. More than half support a ban on assault weapons. You seem to be keeping your stance on guns. You have an A from the NRA, and you opposed Senator Toomey's bipartisan bill to keep guns from terrorists. You support putting guns in the hands of teachers. Can you talk about sort of the schism there?
So first of all, I believe we should be banning bump stocks to begin with. I think we need to fix NICS. Obviously, no gun should get in the hands of anybody who shouldn't have a gun. So I support legislation that would make sure that we don't allow guns into the hands of people who shouldn't have guns. There was a lot of stuff in there. What else would? I don't believe, obviously automatic weapons should not be on the streets. At the same time, I want to protect the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding American citizens as well. And I want to make sure that we're not doing something, to try to prevent what we saw down in Florida. We're not doing something that's going to affect law-abiding citizens but won't fix the problem that we're trying to fix. So
what does that mean? That automatic weapons should not be on the streets?
Automatic weapon? Nobody should have an automatic weapon.
So you support a ban?
On automatic weapons, yes.
Is that a change of opinion on it?
No, I don't.
Are we talking
automatic? No, I don't believe we are.
Assault?
No. Well, so what is an assault weapon? What is an assault weapon? We need to know the definition of what the assault weapon is. So the best way to stop the violence in schools, I have called out for the administration to include schools as the 17th critical infrastructure of America. So right now there are 16 different sectors that are considered critical infrastructure. Our nuclear power plants, our water treatment plants. There's 16 different sectors. And what that means is it's not just a fancy term. What that means is that the Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary of Homeland Security oversees that sector and assesses what needs to be done to keep it from an attack and keep it safe. By allowing schools to be the 17th, it would put Secretary of Homeland Security in to assess each and every school. We would begin to look at each and every school. I mean, I know a school, they don't have doors on some of their classrooms. So when they do, when they have, drills, obviously they're not putting a desk up against the door. There is no door. So assess each school. The best way to keep kids safe is to not let anybody into the school. No parent should ever fear that something's going to happen to their child while they're at school. No child should be afraid to go to school, because the truth of the matter is, I mean, just think of what we saw over our lifetime in a short period. Somebody puts a bomb in their shoe and gets on a plane, and now we take our shoes off when we get on a plane. The next person sticks a bomb in their underwear. What happens is somebody's just going to use another way of committing a horrific act on those children. If there's not guns, maybe the next time it'll be a bomb. Maybe it'll be a chemical. Who knows what a sick mind will do to harm people when they want to kill them. The best way to stop all of that is not let them into school in the first place. And unfortunately, I believe that's where we are in America, where we should include the greatest. Greatest asset we have in this country are our children. So, why not make sure that they can go to school and learn without fear of anyone? We're zeroing in on one weapon, on one type of weapon. Well, we all know that people can use lots of different ways to kill children in school, and I think the best way to stop it is let's get the Department of Homeland Security involved. Let's make schools our 17th critical infrastructure and keep anybody out of our schools that want to do harm to our kids.
I think going back to the assault weapons ban, I think maybe the '94 law had enough loopholes in it that manufacturers were able to find their way around some of the banned list of 15 by making a slight modification. They could do an end around on it. But there is evidence that seems to suggest that ban was at least effective when it came to stopping mass casualty incidents. I mean, we know that in each of these large mass shootings that an AR-15 or an AR-15 style weapon has been involved, as recently as this Waffle House shooting at the weekend. Would you support reinstituting an assault weapons ban if you could settle on an acceptable definition of what that weapon was?
Yeah, because we don't have a definition.
Which is one of the problems with the '94 law. But could you support an assault weapons ban if it arrived at an acceptable definition of what constituted such a weapon, and if it specifically targeted the kind of high-capacity rifle used in most of the last mass casualty incidents?
Well, and correct me, you might. I mean, one of the most horrific shootings was in Virginia. I believe he used 2 handguns.
That does go to the problem because most guns are semi-automatic anyway. Because what semi-automatic means is one squeeze.
Right. So it goes back to what are we trying to do? Is this a debate of people who want guns, or is this about safety of our? I mean, I guess we got to talk about what is our goal here. What is the goal of what we're talking about? Because I want to make sure. So if we're talking about how do we keep our kids safe, right. I want to make sure that we're not going to affect law-abiding Second Amendment people and do something that won't solve what is our goal.
Is there a compelling reason for a citizen?
Well, maybe because you don't like it, John, and I don't like it. Listen, I don't have an AR-15.
I'm just asking,
yeah.
Congressman. Is there a compelling reason for a citizen who's not in law enforcement or does not have a decent reason to have one, to own a weapon in the style of the AR-15?
Well, let me ask you this: is there a compelling reason for someone to have a car that can go 120 miles an hour when the speed limit's only 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, and cars kill?
Did you really?
I mean, because we live in America where we have the freedom to do so. Just because you or I wouldn't want to, why should we?
That's a specious comparison. I mean,
what I'm saying is,
cars are not intended to kill people. Guns exist for.
But what I'm saying is, in America, we do because we can, because of our freedoms, and we have a Second Amendment freedom to do so. And just because you or I may not feel the same way, we have the freedom to do, even if it's just to look at it. That's America. We have that right. But what's your goal for stopping it? Is what I'm trying to get at. Just because you don't like it or I may not like it, what is our goal?
I think we can agree that those nations can exist comfortably side by side with each other. That we can make it more difficult for people to penetrate schools, but simultaneously we can make it more difficult for them to use the implements that are carried out in this incident, or to gain access.
Well, I think you'd have to start with what is an assault weapon? I mean, what is it? What does it include? Does it include does it include guns that hunters use? I mean, what would be included, and then how far do we go, and what's the purpose for doing it? What is the purpose for doing it? That's what I'd like to know, and then I think we can have an honest discussion about it. Is what is your goal of doing it, and what does it include? Will this affect hunting? I mean, we have to really be careful that we protect people in that Second Amendment, that they have the right to do so. Because that's America. We have those rights. And I would be willing if we can talk about what's the purpose of doing it, and what is an assault weapon. And I think we have a starting point for a discussion. But I don't want to affect law-abiding citizens to do something that won't solve what we're trying to solve.
Fair enough. Who's next?
What's your biggest hurdle, and I'm jumping ahead of the primary, to beating Casey? Money?
So,
war chest?
Well, money's got.
Profile?
I mean, yeah, I think it's the Casey name. I mean, it's been Casey name's been. It's like a famous name, you know that in itself. You know, a lot of people still confuse Governor Casey with Bob Casey Jr. You know, it's also, you know, a biggest hurdle is defining who this Bob Casey is and who Bob Casey people have in their mind is, because it is a very famous name. So, you know, many people think this Bob Casey is a very moderate Democrat, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and that's just not who this Bob Casey is. He's not a pro-life, moderate Democrat. In fact, he's moved very far left. And I like to say, Bob Casey, and we come from the same neck of the woods. Like, we know each other a long time, and I like Bob Casey. I personally like him. Bob Casey's a good senator for California or Massachusetts, but no longer for Pennsylvania. I don't believe where this Bob Casey is lines up with the values of most people in Pennsylvania. Most people in Pennsylvania don't think sanctuary cities should be protected. Whether it's Obamacare, whether it's the tax cuts, standing up for working men and women. I believe this Bob Casey's moved left. It's hard when people have an image of a person that has a famous name and a famous background to overcome that. And it's just going to take a lot of hard work and enough money for me to get my message out. I'll never have enough money as Bob Casey has. He's been there for 12 years. I just need enough money to get my message out and show people who I am, and then make a choice who fits Pennsylvania better. I like to think of myself as a blue-collar congressman, as a working congressman. I was a mayor. I had my own business. So I understand. I believe I understand pretty well what people want, and I just think I represent Pennsylvania more. I would like to say I'm more bipartisan than Bob Casey is. I joined a bipartisan working group. There's 27 of us. We meet every Tuesday morning in Washington at 8 o'clock. I've been doing it for 7 years now, to work together on legislation. My work with, for example, with Senator John Yadicek, I always try to find a way that we can work together. And Bob Casey's become, I'm going to say no because it's Donald Trump. And that's not fair to the people of Pennsylvania. I think we need somebody that's going to go there and say, listen, we may not agree on everything, but there's a lot of things we can agree on, and to work for the people of Pennsylvania. And I think that's what I have to offer, that Bob's been in Washington a little bit too long, and I think has gotten entrenched there with a party that has moved out of where Pennsylvania is right now.
With all due respect to Mr. Cristiano, you haven't much of a primary on your hands at the moment.
I'm going to focus on Bob Casey.
I'm getting there. So despite that, you're still having some issues with your fundraising. The NRSC tends to help candidates who help themselves. Are you concerned that might become an issue further down the road if you're facing a significant gap?
Actually the opposite, John. I raised more money in the first quarter. I was like one of the tops in the country as a challenger for money raised in the first quarter. Now, it doesn't compare to what Bob can raise, Casey, obviously, because he's a sitting senator. But I'm one of the tops in the country for money raised in a challenger race, which is pretty darn good, which tells you there's a lot of excitement that people believe that I can beat Bob Casey or that won't happen. That's number one. Number two, when you're running a statewide race, it takes time. Like, you know me, people in this media market knows me, people in the Northeast media market knows me, but nobody knows me out in Western PA. So it takes time to go out there and build relationships with people. You have to go out and meet them. They have to like you. Then they have to be willing to give you some money. That takes time in doing that. And if you look at our campaign, we are building that momentum. Having the endorsement of the president, the vice president, the state party, the NRSC, Senator Tuma, we're building a coalition, and I'm building my fundraising up that we're going to mount a good campaign. But you know, a lot of it again is going to come down to who represents us better, and me making sure I can get that message out. I term limit it myself in the House because I don't believe people should go to Washington for a lifetime, because I think what we saw here with Bob is Washington can change you, and your party can move you to where you're no longer representing the people of that state. Listen, this is still a blue state. There's 800,000 more Democrats than Republicans in Pennsylvania. You need somebody that can work with the other side, and I've proven that, you know, time and time again. Both as a mayor, I won a city that people said I couldn't win because it's 2-1 Democrat. I beat Paul Konjorsky in a congressional seat that was 2-1 Democrat. You wouldn't vote for a person unless the other side believes that you can represent them well, and I've always shown that Democrats can support me. I did that in the past, and I can work with people on both sides.
All right, having come to the end of our allotted 60 minutes.
Thank you.
Congressman, thanks very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.